smoking their water pipes. I'm just enjoying the coffee. Yes, I rode the buses, but I was always deep inside. You wouldn't catch me hanging on for dear life like this. I greatly enjoyed visiting the American University of Beirut. Outstanding reputation, beautiful campus. I prowled around the campus twice. One day I found this magnificent overlook. At the pension, I became friends with Dennis, an Australian journalist. I went with him on an assignment. It was to the Temple of Jupiter in Baalbek, the biggest I've ever seen. Can you see him at the bottom taking a picture? Colossal is the only way to describe that temple. Such enormous columns. That's Dennis again. This is such a monumental and important place that it's curious that it is not far better known. Very few people there that day, but I had a nice chat with this Italian lady. On the way out, I tried to make friends with this Campbell, but he looked at me only with suspicion and disdain, I'm sorry to say. Then, just a short flight to Cairo on the Nile River in Egypt. Cairo is the capital of Egypt, and it is the capital of Islam. Huge city. Many of the sites seem to pop right out of the National Geographic magazine. Know what I mean? All the mosques, however, are astonishing. There are hundreds of mosques all over the city. It's a modern city, but the old ways, the really old ways, survive. This is the American University of Cairo. Very prestigious. Very, very beautiful. I chatted with these co-eds. Yes, co-eds. There are aspects of modernization. I got the impression that studying is a serious business. No fooling around. That impressed me. This is an indoor market. Look at the lights streaming in. Look at how busy. So much for sale. A typical street scene. I think they need somebody to direct traffic here. I had no idea that there would be so many huge, modern, impressive buildings in Cairo. Look at this. This doesn't look like the National Geographic magazine. This is modern Cairo. We're on a riverboat. These schoolgirls were fascinated by me. They're looking at me. That's my reflection on the other side. Taking a break at the neighborhood cafe with a water pipe is a normal part of the day for men. This was my hotel. There was a suite of rooms way up at the top. Very convenient, close to everything downtown. The hotel manager on the left, the owner on the right, different clothes but the same wonderful smiles. Two men walking hand in hand, not considered unusual, just an everyday sight. They eat kebabs the way we eat hamburgers. It's a staple of the diet. They served me a kebab, and then I had fun taking their picture. Good guys. Yes, a McDonald's. Notice the young ladies, the old attire, the new attire. Unusual, McDonald's has a home delivery service here. This fellow's tanking up. Surprise! The pyramids are not way out in the desert. They're right in the city. This astonished me. This is the Great Pyramid, the greatest pyramid of all, and that's the famous Sphinx on the left. Yep, this Pizza Hut was right across the street. This is where I took the picture of the Sphinx and the pyramid from. Later I took a taxi maybe 50 minutes out and I was in the real desert. The agricultural country gives out fast. Typical scene. Ready for a camel drive? Not me. One of my priorities was to visit the Great Egyptian Museum of Antiquity. A vast museum, famous all over the world, and so busy. These people are waiting for the doors open. Students and tourists from everywhere. I could have spent a week in there, that's how good it was. I roamed around, and I had my little digital camera, and I took pictures of just about everything in sight. An infinite variety, and again, a museum of antiquity. Things so old to the beginning of known civilization. Surprising what incredible craftsmanship. Surprising how many materials they learned to work with. There were magnificent, unforgettable items, pieces exhibiting the greatest imagination and sophistication, pieces that were whimsical and poignant and unforgettable, really. Look at the, what shall I call it, majestic royalty of this piece. Two student artists were working so intensely. Who knows, maybe they'll be famous artists someday. Imagine the technical know-how that was needed to create a magnificent piece like this. Sorry folks, this piece is not an antique. It's the sign to the toilet. Beautiful, isn't it? Back on the street. Those aren't cigarettes she's selling. That's toilet paper. Yep. I spotted this contemporary art. Beautiful piece. So joyous, isn't it? Happy. Even in modern Cairo, some people continue to shop the old-fashioned way. Women are women everywhere. I wish I had an idea of what they were talking about. This is a picture that really gives me hope for the men and women, particularly the women of Cairo and of Egypt today. Next, a long flight to Nairobi in Kenya. That's on the east side of the continent, halfway down on the Indian Ocean. It blew my mind. Let me tell you why. I grew up in the days when many people thought of this continent as dark Africa, meaning backward. The buildings that I saw all around me were contemporary buildings, huge buildings, skyscrapers, as modern as any I've seen anywhere. I was astonished, that's the word to use. As usual, I was up and around every day. I wanted to see everything I could and feel the pulse of this modern city. I found there were more matatus than buses. I found the usual big buses, but far more of these freelance vans that are called matatus. I used matatus. I stayed at this youth hostel, but it was a hostel, as always, for youth of all ages. There were people there as old as I and very, very young. And as always, people came from many places. People were friendly. People were helpful. In fact, this was my experience with hostels everywhere. I wish I could get more people to try hostels. These two men, obviously from different countries and cultures, were becoming friends. The hostel had a travel agency. Its hot item was wildlife safaris. I wasn't planning to take one. I had more interest in this city. I got pleasure in seeing ordinary people right there in Nairobi, like this lady with the chicken. One day I went out to a reconstructed village. I got an idea of what life is like in the interior. On Christmas morning I attended a mass at a church nearby. Very beautiful. Afterward, outside, I saw these two ladies who were friends, one in modern dress and one in traditional. I saw contemporary paintings. Look at this one. Don't you love the lively colors? Don't you love the exuberance? The very big city of Johannesburg was my first stop in South Africa. It's near here that the terrible social separation called apartheid came crashing down. My hosts were Reverend Derek Maragel and his wife Joan. I had met them when they spent quite a bit of time in Connecticut. I attended Derek's service at his church on Sunday. In fact, I spoke at the church. I'm told I was the first white man to speak in that church. Isn't that something? I took this picture of the Greyhound station because I was so impressed by the magnificent Greyhound buses there. Derek spent many hours taking me around and explaining things. We became good friends. We had a heck of a lot of fun. He was excited about showing me Regina Mundi Catholic Church in Soweto. It has become famous. It's here that the first powerful resistance to apartheid took place. It changed South Africa's destiny. Durban is famous as a resort on the Indian Ocean. It's much more than a resort. It's a very big commercial city, very attractive in many ways. I was very impressed by its many delights. I enjoyed it tremendously. It's got beautiful buildings. Some of them are traditional with a great charm, and some of them are utterly modern. This young woman was very kind to me on my very first morning. She led me in the right direction to where I had to go. Again, I stayed at a pleasant hostel. This was Vias from the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Another guest was Gunther, a German. Good guy. I lost to him, but he was a good winner. Nearby was this escort service, but it was more than an escort service, if you know what I mean. A very strange story, if you remember what I wrote in my book. This was Kevin, the extraordinary owner, and these were his girls. Durban has a very large Indian population. This was Jerry, who ran a coffee shop. We became friends. In fact, there was a large India town, very enjoyable. Yes, I had some wonderful Indian food. You remember that I did not go on a safari in Kenya. I made up for it here. I found a wonderful natural history museum, and I took these pictures of the wild creatures behind glass windows. So much to see and learn in new places. For instance, this woman was selling telephone calls on her portable telephone. And this was a street-side barber shop. Just pick the cut you wanted and go in. That's all there was to it. Durban is on the ocean and is famous for its sandy beaches. I had to get there. It was just a nice walk along an avenue. It was New Year's Day, and there were thousands of people headed for the beach. And I seemed to be the only white person, really. Strange experience, one that I had never experienced. I spent 3 or 4 hours there. I walked along the beach. I walked around the pool. I snapped a lot of pictures. I chatted with a few people. I had a wonderful time. Memorable New Year's Day. People were very nice to me. Finally, Cape Town at the very bottom of Africa. Yes, I traveled from Cairo in northern Africa down to the very southern tip. Cape Town is a very important city, and it looks it. It's got some very fine buildings, some very modern buildings, some beautiful government buildings, museums, marvelous shopping. Table Mountain, there it is in the background. Famous Table Mountain, known to mariners from all over the world. This gives you an idea of how modern and how attractive some areas of the city are. Surprisingly, it is Africa's youngest large city. It was founded less than 400 years ago. What made it so important is its strategic location, right where the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans meet. You can see the great European influence here in the architecture and in the city layout. I am having a wonderful dinner with Alec and his brother Abe. Alec is the one at the left. If you remember from my book, Alec is the only Alec in the world. You know how he got a very harsh and difficult beginning in life, and how through his own bootstrap efforts he succeeded. The end of apartheid is making it possible for other blacks to achieve the same success. There was another area of town, the area where my hostel was, that reminded me of New Orleans. My hostel was a good one. This was my new young friend there. Looks content, doesn't he? The hostel was upstairs here, and it was really a beautiful and a very delightful place with a lot of good company. Ethnic restaurants, souvenir shops, bookshops, yoga parlors. Very interesting. But as in New Orleans, there were some tawdry aspects to the neighborhood, as you can see. Sunday morning, the neighborhood became tame and very quiet. Sunday morning, the neighborhood became tame and quiet. Then time to say goodbye to Africa, what I call the unappreciated continent. Time to fly across the vast South Atlantic and head to South America for a new chapter in my world trip. From Cape Town to Buenos Aires, Argentina, 5,000 miles across the South Pacific, second longest flight on my world trip. I had been here before, so I knew this was truly a grand city, beautiful avenues, boulevards, parks. Buenos Aires is often called the Paris of South America, and you can see by looking at these grand buildings and these beautiful boulevards why the comparison is very apt. So save money and go to the Paris of South America. This is not the Champs-Élysées, but the strolling is very pleasant nevertheless. Oh, please notice this clever spiral staircase on this downtown building. But the side streets are narrow and often shaded. This is where the older buildings are. I stayed at 2 hostels here. This was the first, an old mansion, truly elegant. Locutorios are shops where people come to make their telephone calls and use the internet. There are hundreds of them. This is South America, of course, and the Latin gusto and passion show in the public art. Look at this mural. This was the hostel office. Yes, hostels can be very surprising. You wouldn't expect this, would you? This is Diana, the secretary. She helped me with some of my phone calls. Using strange telephones or Spanish isn't that easy. Another locutorio, one on every corner it seemed. I use such shops every day. This is where I wrote my articles. It was winter back in the States, but summer here, of course. I've got to tell you I loved it. Lots of little markets with really fresh food. Lots of fun. And of course, I learned some Spanish. Yes, Buenos Aires is a magnificent city. Great statues. I could see this one right from my hostel window. Look at this cute little guy selling flowers for his mama. Super salesman, I guess. As always, it was fun to walk the city streets. I love architectural details. Look at these doors. Plenty of street musicians playing for tips. All kinds of music. This is shady because of the narrow streets and high buildings. Here is a sample of the narrow streets. And people everywhere. A lot of unemployment in Argentina these days, but there are still people around who can buy beautiful things. The city is famous for its pedestrian malls. No cars, just happy walkers. Another little boy helping his family. To think of it, I've never seen a scene like this in the United States. A lot of street performers, maybe because of the hard times. This poor guy, though, isn't getting much attention. This trio I really enjoyed. I lingered for 10 minutes. I didn't see many coins tossed in their bag. One of hundreds of side streets, quaint and colorful. And look at all the motorbikes. Yes, don't you think this could be a scene from Paris or Rome? There is a very strong European influence. One night I went to a tango show at a fine old tango restaurant. 4 hours. I loved it. Beautiful dances. What dancing. The crooners were sensational. My type of music. I took these pictures with available light. I'm so pleased with the way they came out. This was the second hostel I stayed at. I wanted to give you a look. Many of you have never been in a hostel. Lots of fun. This was one of the public lounges. It has a homey feeling, don't you think? The only hostel I've ever been in with triple bunks. On the first night, I had to sleep way up there. Argentina has a large population of Italians. Many people came over for a new start here. And there's a very nice Italian section to Buenos Aires. It's a favorite tourist area. This is what it looks like. Look at how colorful it is. All kinds of boutiques. I mentioned monuments. Look at this one. Fabulous. Argentinians have a passion, a real passion for the tango. They dance on the street. Look at this couple. This is an artsy museum. There are many artists with many displays of their paintings. It's a free museum outdoors. Right across the river from Buenos Aires is the small country of Uruguay, and down the river a bit is its capital, Montevideo. Montevideo is impressive in its own right, but it gets overshadowed by Buenos Aires. A big city in a small country with its own distinctive identity. Everybody drinks yerba mate. It's the national hot beverage. Yerba mate sets, take your pick. Yes, it's a set. You need a cup and a metal straw. For years, this building was the tallest in South America. What an odd building. Look at it. Amazing. Huge statues. How can such a tiny country as Uruguay afford such huge statues? Yes, a pleasant and relaxing place. This is a pedestrian street downtown. More Americans should consider visiting it. The dollar goes a long way. I came upon a flea market of good stuff, very little junk, and spent a couple of hours there just strolling around. I was tempted to buy a couple of things, but no practical way to get them home. That can be a problem. Yes, a McDonald's, a small sign, but a big store. This was close to where a thief attacked me. This old restaurant now has fine boutiques and restaurants that tourists like very much. Since its beginning, animal husbandry has been the backbone of its economy. Millions of sheep and millions of cattle. And much of this has been shipped to the United States, of course. Some people have a hard time. It's true all over the world. This is the old part of the city down by the river. Lots of charm. I couldn't resist. I bought this painting in this gallery for my sister Lucy. She loves to tango. This band had plenty of pep. But look at her. Wow. Another scene downtown. Yes, Uruguay is a small country, but there's nothing small about Montevideo. Still fine old buildings around which remind you of the great colonial days. Another fine old building, now the hostel that I stayed at, now is part of the Hosteling International chain. As usual, I had fun there, although this young whippersnapper from Brazil beat me. Great time. Next, Rio. Exciting. Famous for its beaches, but much, much more there than just beaches. This is the Copacabana section. The great landmark, the statue of Christ way up on Sugarloaf Mountain, visible everywhere. A view from a farther beach. Look at how the great city sprawls. And again, that's Sugarloaf. Copacabana Beach was nearby, and I made a stop just about every afternoon. The skimpier the better. That's the idea here. Some beautiful bodies, and some that should be skipped, like mine. This couple had no idea I was taking their picture. Good thing, I suppose. More people now. Late in the afternoon, soccer players took over the beaches. Wow. Wow, that's all I have to say. Very casual lifestyle. They speak Portuguese here. These sidewalks reminded me of Portugal. This is a smaller beach, Ipanema, made famous by that song, The Girl from Ipanema. Back from the beach, the city was interesting in many other ways. I kept thinking it was summer here, but snow back home. I spent every day walking around and enjoying the many sights. Fabulous city. This was the tram up to Santa Teresa. If you remember, I tried to make it, but shucks, I never did. I enjoyed this neighborhood park nearby. It was always nice and cool. I loved it. This is my favorite picture, walking the fabulous beaches late in the afternoon. Iguazu Falls, the biggest, widest falls anywhere in the world. The first man I met, he was pressing sugar cane. I had 2 glasses of the wonderful juice. I couldn't resist this picture of these blankets. I wondered if all these animals lived nearby. Yes, another hostel. These young hostelers were my welcoming committee. Lovely place. Yes, I was tired. The relaxed grounds were just what I needed at that time. This was the dining room. Look at how informal everything was. There was a bar. I couldn't help feeling that some of these kids would be underage back home. A very popular place. Some people had to sleep in their tents. They didn't seem to mind. A hostel with a pool. That was the first in my experience. Loved it. Iguazu Falls was my focus, of course. Unbelievable. Even at this distance, the roar of the falling water was tremendous. I absolutely had to have a souvenir picture of myself. This strange animal and its pal attacked me for my peanut butter sandwich, but they didn't get it. Next, São Paulo, Brazil, one of the largest cities in the world. 20 million people here, they say. My main reason was to see Marguerite, an old family friend. She's a Brazilian. We knew her back in the United States. We exchanged gifts. I was exhausted. I think I looked it. Don't you think so? All I wanted was rest, rest, rest. The view from her balcony. High-rise buildings beyond number. Thousands of them. They made me think of a forest. She's a marketing director, big projects, leading a very good life. Asuncion, capital of Paraguay. I planned 4 days here. I spent only 1 hour. They wouldn't sell me a visa. I couldn't believe it. And they stood by my side and forced me, believe it or not, to take the next plane to Chile. Now, over to the Pacific side, to Santiago, capital of Chile. Very important city. Unfortunately, able to show you only some of the pictures I took here. I was the guest of Adi and Maggie, Americans who live here. Adi is the manager of an American chemical plant here. Santiago is a very livable city with a lot of culture and a high quality of life. Interesting in 1,000 ways. We Americans depend on Chile. We couldn't get along without its fruits and vegetables, or its wonderful wines, I think. One day Adi took me on an excursion in his 4-wheel drive up into the mountains nearby. High up we went. No trees up here. Vast views. Thin air. We were all alone up here. We had a grand time looking around, taking pictures, and enjoying the getaway. So close to the city, yet, in a strange way, so far removed. We came upon two women, all alone, digging for something. They were scientists, specialists in insects, especially a certain bee. We went exploring some more. A quiet wonderland. We came upon a horseman, a guide. Of course, I spent time touring Santiago. Beautiful city, really worth visiting. And here I am on Audie and Maggie's balcony, doing my usual thing, putting it all down on paper. Valparaiso was a big port of call for ships going around the Horn before the opening of the Panama Canal. Its public buildings reflect the vital role the city had in the development of Chile. The excursion covered a long, long day, and I crammed it as full as I could, walking and looking at everything. Some neighborhoods are built on high bluffs. They are connected to the city below by cable cars like this one. The cable cars are still essential. Each one has a stairway for people who don't want to pay. This is a typical ascensor station. You buy your ticket and you get into one of the creaky wooden cars. Then up and up you go. It's a lot of fun, especially if you're a tourist. Wonderful views up there of the sprawling city and of the great harbor. The opening of the Panama Canal threw the city into an economic stall that still goes on. No tourist comes to Valparaiso without going up onto the bluffs, and you can see why. Chile has its Naval Academy up there like Annapolis, but most of the cadets were away on cruise. Seeing the life of the people up there was interesting. It seemed a small, neighborly, intimate community. I sauntered into another neighborhood. No tourists here, just the workaday world. People are much the same everywhere. Gosh, who doesn't like pets? Valparaiso is old-fashioned in many ways. This is a good example of what I mean. This caught my eye. I like to play a game now and then. I like it better when I don't lose. This store was just like one I knew as a boy. What wonderful memories are brought back. Next, I took an overnight bus to Bariloche, just over the border from Chile. Bariloche is famous as the Switzerland of South America. Beautiful mountains, lakes, and scenery. On the bus I met Fernando and Violette from France. They have become good friends of mine. This was the center of the very attractive city of Bariloche. Always a lot going on here. Informal entertainment, musicians, artists, jugglers. I made a stop here every day. It deserves to be compared with Switzerland, but the good news is that Bariloche is much cheaper. The mountains and the lake are the great attraction, of course. The area has been developed as a first-class recreation area. This crazy Jeep and trailer came along and I hopped on for a city tour. From this center, the city radiated out on three sides. All the side streets were filled with restaurants and shops, entertainment of all kinds. The big attraction were the low prices and the great variety. This was the hostel up on the mountain where I stayed.